Welcome to Technique Friday, and the theme of this particular Technique Friday is colour blending, and we're looking at the colour blue. So last week we looked at red, and I'm starting off with the primary colours. So I'm started off with red, going with blue this week, and next week will be yellow. But you can, as usual, I'm going to start with the colour wheel. So when you add blue to blue, you keep blue. Now blue is a cool colour, and it really only mixes very, very well with cool colours. Now it mixes best with warms that have cool colours already added to them. So the warm opposites that it has here, it doesn't necessarily mix particularly well with a lot of those, and you'll see as we go around. But if you pop it into a blue violet, which is looking blue but then going into purple, it's going to have an additional deeper blue. And when I talk deeper blue, you're going into that kind of almost an ultramarine kind of blue colour, heading into a navy. The same with the violet. Now the violet, that violet there is particularly equal in the red and the blue. This is a red violet, that's a blue violet. This is equal in its properties. It still produces, because it's got some red in it, still produces a very blue shade of violet. So if you were to have a look at that and compare that and that colour there, they would be just about identical. Now adding it to a red violet gives you a deeper violet purple away from your magentas and into like an actual violet colour that's more blue. Maybe kind of like that one there, more blue. So when we add it to red, we get a strong purple, and I can tell you right now, if you add those two colours together, the purple will be darker than that. That's showing up as quite bright, but it's not that bright. It will be more of a deep muddy, and it really depends on the even colours and the quantities of the blue and the red that you add, as is with any colour mixing. So when you pop it in with a red orange, it still has red in it, so it's still going purple. But when you pop it in with orange, it makes like a grey, a brown grey, so a neutral, because orange is the exact opposite. If you have a look at this colour wheel, you've got blue, orange is the exact opposite colour, the complementary colour. They look good and brilliant together, but when you mix them together you get a neutral. And when I talk neutral, that's what I mean. Now that particular neutral is like a grey brown. But when you tilt that orange away and you make it more yellow, you start getting shades of green. You have a warm yellow. So when I'm talking warm yellows, I'd be talking a Turner's yellow, probably more cadmium yellow, very close to that kind of yellow. Add it in. Add the blue in with that, you get that beautiful green. Now we all know the blue and yellow make green, but what is gorgeous about this colour family is the amount of greens you can get. So now you're going down into an aqua. So we're going down more into these sorts of colours now. Keep adding it again, just a hint of the heaps less yellow. Right, and we're going into these amazing blues. This is dark, but it's colony blue, very similar in its tone. And when I talk about tone, if you read the colour wheel here, when it talks about tone, tone is the colour plus grey. So we're looking at the colour plus grey. So when I say that tonally is the same, it is, that's just lighter. This one here's had more grey, got more grey in it, but it's the same tone. And we're back to blue. Now When I talk about hue, it's the name of a particular colour, example blue, orange, green and yellow. So when we talk about hue, we say if you've got a purple, then it could have more of a red hue than a blue hue. When you have a look at the tint, it's the colour plus white. And when you look at the shade, it's the colour plus black. Now, as I showed you last week, when you are shading with cool colours, black is not always the best friend for you to use. So I actually have a lot of blue paints. I'll just zoom out and we'll get to my sheet. Now I'll rip off this sheet. And we'll start with a big clean sheet. Now I have an awful lot of blues. So what I'm going to do is just quickly swatch these blues for you, and these are not even all the blues I've had, but they're what they're what I'm using today. And the reason I know that I have a lot is that I have a reference guide with those blues in them. Okay, so what I'm going to do is write down the names of the blues and then I'm going to swatch them in. I'm going to speed through this process because this is actually quite a long process for this particular colour family. As you can see, I have a lot more than what I have in red. Okay, so I've swatched all the blues and you'll notice that I've put them in families of blues. So up here I've just got some phthalates, but I've used a couple of goldens, and I've got some phthalates. Now the phthalo blues are actually my favourite tones of blue. You can tell that they have some greens in them, but not enough for it to be overwhelmingly down into these teals and aquamarines. But they do have a beautiful green, and I can tell you now that the phthalo blues mix absolutely beautifully with white. Then I've done some ultramarine. So this is ultramarine blue, but in 3 different brands, and cobalt in 3 different blends. And you can see how not all cobalts are equal and not all ultramarines are equal. When you have a look down into these 3 here, this is a colony blue, a sapphire blue and a French blue, and they all have a lot of grey in them. So we're getting away from these primary blues down into colour mixing tones with greys. And you've got one that's got more of a green onto the teal spectrum, one that's a blue that you would think has been made with a cobalt with a grey, and you've got a French blue which is almost like a Payne's grey. And I've got, just for last, I've left a Payne's grey, which is one of my all-time favourite colours, and it's called Payne's grey, but it's like a dark blue. And that's the Atelier in the Payne's Grey. If you actually get the Payne's Grey in the golden, it's much bluer. And even in the Atelier, let me just get this is the same brand, but they're fluid. Clean the brush off, and let's just see. Okay, so the fluid interacts just that little bit differently. It's a little bit darker. Get off. Okay, so the second part of the lesson is, after we've swatched all those things, is I take you through some basic shading techniques. So some basic shading. So as we go down, there are colours that work well with blue, and most of them are in the cool spectrum. Cool blends better with cool, but yellow is almost like white, the universal colour. So if we put some yellows down, a few reds, but we've already done reds, and magenta. I'm going to go with greens, orange, and aqua, teal, and cream, white. Okay, so what I'm going to do is choose one blue. Now I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with the yellows. So I've got a number of yellows. Okay, so we're going to start from our lightest. Okay, so I have a Naples, which is probably my favourite shade of yellow, and then I'm using a Liquitex Basic Cadmium Yellow Light. Then I'm looking at a Cadmium Yellow Mid, a Turner's Yellow, and then a Deep Yellow. So we're grading down the yellows. So let's throw our blue in. Trying to carefully put equal amounts in, just roughly. So we'll start the first. Okay, had all these interruptions because my eldest son has finished school for the year and he's just got his learner's permit. So now I'm fielding inquiries, and when I have my sign on the door that says do not interrupt filming, they don't understand that doesn't mean close the door. Don't open the door. Filming. Anyway, so having a look at that basic cobalt blue, you can tell that this yellow actually has grey tones in it. It's produced a very grey colour, not unlike the sapphire colour here, right? And you can see the various shades of green and how muddy they are depending on the amount of orange that's in the yellows and the particular hue of the yellows. It's a beautiful, it's almost like a blue-green, you know, like getting into that, almost combine into the, going in, you can think almost into your aquamarines with the Liquitex, cadmium yellow light. But when you start going deeper, you're getting like that leaf green, that real beautiful green, frog green. And as we deepen the colours with more orange, we go muddier in our greens. There's still a lot of yellow in them, but there's still orange in them, and they're starting to go muddier. So what I'm going to do for the next lot is move this across so that you can see all of it in one hit while I'm going to fast forward that. And then I'll explain through, like I did last week, the different tones and whatever is going on here. Okay, so I've blended everything, and as you can see, I've got, let me use a pencil as a pointer, I've got yellows. Now we've done the first yellows, so we've got the reds and the magentas, so we've used basic red, we've used crimson, we've used magentas, right, and at the bottom I've used a purple madder. So the purple madder is already a deep kind of purpley colour. So these were the reds and the magentas and down into the purples that I've already used to create this colour palette. Now some of them are ostensibly come out more blue than others, and that is generally to do with the percentages of colours that you've put in there or the way I've mixed them. But apart from this one here, which is not a really red violet, and you would expect that if I put more blue into it that it would go bluer, the majority of them are actually still continuing to be quite red. What you find when mixing reds and blues together, depending on your desire for things, is that you generally will need more blue than red. Red is hotter and more dominant than the blue. So that's kind of where we're going with the reds and magentas. And then I've gone to greens. So as you were seeing, I used greens. And I used a whole heap of different hued greens. So this is a lime green, it's a brilliant yellow green, and of course it's dominant in the yellow. So when you get it forming, I was actually surprised that it came out to be quite an aqua colour. I thought that it would have more yellow through that, as we're starting to see in this one here, which if you put the two together actually looks like it's got more blue in it, but it's actually come out a little bit more yellow. So as base tones go, this monastral green here, that's like a really, really bright lime green. That's gone into like a real leaf green, a natural kind of leaf green. And this is actually a green oxide, and it's like a leaf green really on its own, and then when you add blue to it, that's what you would use to shade it. So one of the things that I like to say to you, and my tip, one of the tips is, if you're going to paint leaves, you would use blue to shadow and yellow to highlight. Very similar to your reds in the way that that works. So if I literally get a green and I just paint a leaf, I'll just zoom this in so you can see what I'm doing. So I've got a green and I'm going to paint a leaf. I'm going to add more in because you want paint to blend. Okay, so I have my leaf and the paint's still wet. So the next thing I do, say I wanted to show a highlight in the middle, I go for a yellow. And I'm leaving some water on this. You just blend it in. If you were to put white into that, so we'll do that rough line there. If you were to put white into that, it would go pastel. Now while it's still wet, a little bit of this blue we've been using, and just blend it, and then blend it into the yellow. And if you want a deeper shadow, and so you wouldn't use black, you'd use the colours that are naturally designed, that the greens are made up of as their lights and darks. And I'll just zoom into that so that you can see that there's a decent colour gradation going on there. And if I was to add more, you get a definite blue feel, but it still blends in to make a green. And so I carry it over here and you get different colours, and you're creating different colours the whole time. There's another quick technique that I want to show you, but I'll do that after. Using watercolours, and I know I'm only working in acrylics, but I'll show you how you can use this in watercolours. So the next one that I did was orange, and of course you know that these are going to make brown, but what I kind of didn't realise was that the different oranges really made a difference. And you've definitely got a brown there, but you've got more of a purple here. So this particular orange has more red in it, and it's formed a purple, not unlike some of the colours here, but it's a beautiful shadowy colour that you would use in conjunction with browns. And when you put these together, when you put your opposites together, it creates the neutral shadow tones that you would use, and I'll show you a little bit about that in a minute in watercolour. So, and then I've used a Jaune Brilliant, which is like the Naples Yellow, has some white in it, and has, you know, it is a real peachy pastel-y colour, and that creates like a blue-grey. Very much could be used as facial tones. So it's definitely not created like it's created like a bluey kind of pale beige brown colour. So it's interesting to see the different things. Now, I've applied the blue to all the teals, and it's just deepened the teals. Particularly, I'm loving this beautiful phthalo turquoise, and it deepened it and just made it that little bit bluer. I just really loved it. These were the 3 colours used, and those were the 3 results. And all it did was just blew up these teals that little bit more. And then we went into the creams and the whites. Now, I also used some skin tone, and I also used a toning grey, and this is a toning, it says toning grey yellowish, and it's in the Atelier brand. It's one of my favourite colours because it's kind of a yellow grey, and I really, really like it. And then just the plain white down the bottom, and obviously with the white, again, you'll see the added colour in. Now, one thing that I wanted to point out to you here is that these colours here are very much along the lines of smoky blues. So when you're trying to make a smoky blue, what's the trick? Not add black. Black just deepens the colour. But greys and beiges, they create that smoky tone in your blues. And so if you're shading blues and you really want some kind of fleshy, muddy features of the blues to create shadows, you would add, there's some skin tone and some grey yellowish, which is very similar to skin tone, but also this cream creates that beautiful kind of eggshell blue that I love. And of course the white creates a baby blue here, which is in a big patch. So interesting to see what actually tones, when you're going tone, how that all works. I'm going to show you a really quick blending technique, and I'm going to use a different medium. And I'm going to use different paper. Right, so I'm just quickly going to draw. Let me just drag in a pencil. So I'm just going to do a very light tree trunk. Just a rough tree trunk. Okay. Right, so the main purpose of this is to actually start getting a wash. Let's get that water coming out. Beautiful. So I'm going to pre-wet, because with all watercolours you you can go dry, but you can go pre-wet. And I'm not pre-wetting it perfectly all the way down, because there are some features that I want to capture here. But I want to show you how you use your base, how you can use your base colours to create browns. So what we're doing first is I have a Prussian blue. So the Prussian blue is going to go down the side here that I want my shadows on. But I'm immediately going to add in some orange. I'm just going to drop, oh, that's some red. That's not even orange. Let's have a look and see how that works as we drop the extra water in. And you just let it. And then I'm going to drop that the yellow ochre and provide a different hue again with the orange. So let me just drag an orange out. Here we go. A vermilion. And I'll pop it down in here. And we're going to definitely bring a high amount of water down into these spaces, starting to create a brown. We need some more blue coming down this side here and bleeding, so we need to have a nice big bleed factor. Then the orange, and just drop the orange in spots and let it really run. And then I'm actually going to pick out a brown, a nutty brown, and start laying that in. And letting it blend how it may. And one of the things about watercolours is these natural colours that you get by letting the water mix randomly with these other colours. And I've just introduced an ochre, and I'm going to really let that bleed. And we'll put a little bit of orange here. And see how it's creating a unique shade of brown, but the variegation goes differently for each part of the trunk. So if I wanted to introduce a different kind of shadow along this edge and along that edge, I could definitely do that. And then I would look at adding in some orange. I'm out of water in that, and you can tell I'm out of water. And you'd let them just mix where they want, the orange and the blue, to create different tones in the tree trunk all the way down. And I often drop things in with dots, but now you're looking at a tree trunk, and this is your first layer, but it's got some lovely swirling parts of it that you can pop in here and create just the water, lay the water down so that it works differently and bleeds colour out of certain spaces, and see how that treats. Now I'll come back to that when that's dry, but that's how using a blue and an orange in watercolour can create that unique set of browns, you can add some browns and yellows into that then, and actually just lay it right down and let it all marble together as you keep creating unique colours. And that's one of the beauties of watercolour. And that's how you then look at using your primaries as your primary colours with that blue and that complementary. You know, like if I was going to mix watercolour, say I've got the Prussian blue, so we've got the Prussian blue there, and you have a good lot of water on it, and then I clean my brush off and I add in orange, and we drag it down. Have a look at those beautiful brown tones. You got the bluer end here and the orange end there, and that gives you a unique, depending on your build up, gives you a unique brown that's variegated all the way up and down before you pre-mix. Now I often use the same kinds of methods in acrylics, but they don't work the same because acrylics dry faster. And if you wanted to be able to, and you can't water them down, but if you really wanted to have a longer time to explore blending, you would just use a retarder. But this is how you can create unique reds, unique browns out of your blues and yellows. So this week I've taught you a different blending method, and it's in watercolour, and it's about dropping colours in, starting with one, making new colours with the other, colours that aren't pre-mixed, and testing out how your ratios of blue to orange would go for you, even when you're using them in a way that creates a brown on normal paper. So let's just